Welcome to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network with your hostess, Jen Josie. Join like-minded real estate investors and accelerate your business towards greatness. You will hear step-by-step strategies for success, interviews with real estate rock stars, and we will dig deep into past projects where we bear it all, including the good, the bad, and some just plain ugly. So get excited. Here's the bestower of badassery herself, the real Jen Josie. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Jen Josie, creator of RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Whoop, whoop. On today's episode, we have a guest that will be sharing their badassery. But before we begin, here's today's badassery bestowment, my little badass gift to you. Today's topic is protecting your credit as an investor. Let's be real, your credit score is like your real estate reputation. It's hard to build, it's easy to wreck, and absolutely essential for unlocking the best deals and funding. Whether you're just starting out or growing your empire, keeping your credit in top shape is non-negotiable if you want to play in the big leagues. Here are 5 actionable tips to keep your credit sparkling and your investment future wide open. Number 1, monitor your credit like a hawk. Check your credit reports regularly. Look for errors, unfamiliar accounts, anything fishy. The sooner you spot an issue, the easier it is to fix. Number 2, this one's tough for me, keep your balances low. High credit card balances can tank your score even if you pay on time. Aim to use less than 30% of your available credit, bonus points if you can keep it under 10%. Number 3, never miss a payment. Set up auto pay or reminders for every bill like mortgages, credit cards, utilities, the works. One late payment can haunt you for years. Number 4, limit hard inquiries. Every time you apply for a loan or new credit, your score takes a tiny hit. Only apply for what you truly need and try to space out your applications. Number 5, separate business and personal credit. Open business credit cards and lines when possible. This not only helps you build business credit, but also shields your personal score from business swings. So remember, your credit is your golden ticket in real estate. Guard it fiercely, use it wisely, and let it open doors to bigger, better deals. Protect your credit and you'll always be ready for your next badass move. Now on to today's episode of the Real Estate Investor Growth Network podcast. We have with us the legend, Joel Miller, a true veteran in the world of real estate investing. Joel has been investing in rental properties since 1978 and flipping houses since the year I graduated high school, 1991. Talk about experience. He's held leadership roles both professionally and personally, teaches real estate investing at all levels, and even lends hard money to other investors. On top of that, Joel's a trusted mentor, author, podcast guest, and generous benefactor to his community. And before all this real estate badassery, Joel earned his BA in accounting. He's here to share his insights, lessons learned, and some powerful advice for investors at every stage. We are happy to have him on the show, so welcome, Joel Miller. Woohoo!
Thank you, Jen Josie. That's the most awesome introduction I have ever had as a podcast guest.
Well,
when you
I
added
am
the applause, that was just like taking it over the top. You know?
Well, I appreciate that so much, and you have quite an experience in front of the microphone, so I was a little nervous going through all that. So I want to hear about your background in real estate, but you started sharing some information about being a disc jockey. So give us some more of your background. You are so interesting, Joel. Let us hear about it.
Thanks, Jen. Everything leads up to the book that we're talking about later, Build Real Estate Wealth. But I will tell you, there were 2 things that happened to me in junior high school. that really set me on the path of the two main things that I did in life. Number one, an investor built four unit apartment townhouses at the edge of my subdivision, right on my paper route. So I got all them as customers on my paper route. And I have a distinct memory of about eighth grade being in my bedroom, kind of doing the math on what this whole rental property thing looks like. Because we all live with our parents in single family homes that they own. This rental thing was like, okay, what's that all? They don't own that. They pay and somebody else owns that. So it was sort of a rudimentary understanding of that. And I said, I think I want to do that. And I put that in my back pocket. So when I'm old enough, I'll do that. The other thing was that one of the older kids in the neighborhood built a pirate radio station in his basement with the antenna on a flagpole in the backyard. And a pirate radio station is like an illegal, unlicensed radio station, So I get to hang out there. And that is when I made a decision I want to be a disc jockey. So I actually did a bunch of radio production in high school. And when I went away to college, and I wanted to study accounting because I did have a real interest in that. And you can use accounting in whatever industry you go into. I made sure I went to a school. I went to Grove City College between where I'm at in Erie, Pennsylvania, and in Pittsburgh. And they had a great accounting department. I made sure that they also had a good radio station. And they had two, an AM and an FM radio station. And I got on there as a freshman. I worked at the college or at the commercial radio station in town when I was at the college. And then at the end of my sophomore year, the big top 40 radio station in my town asked me, because they were familiar with me from my radio production that I had done in high school, to come and be their part-time guy, weekend guy.
Wow.
So I transferred to Mercyhurst College here in Erie and finished in 4 years with a degree in accounting, but worked at the radio station. And then about 6 weeks before I graduated from college, the job went full-time. So now I'm coming out of college, I'm already full-time on radio. So
wow.
I am now able to accept the calls from the kids at the high schools that want the DJs on the radio station to come out and do the record hops in their gym, And Jen, I went and did my first one in 1976, and I made $75, and that changed my life. And so I only stuck with radio for 1 year after that, and I pioneered the professional mobile DJ business in this part of the country. And over 35 years, I did 5,051 appearances. Retired from that in 2011. But jumping back to the 70s, not long after I left the radio station, and then very short time after I had done my first mobile DJ appearance, I bought my first rental property in January of 1978. Jen, I still have that property. I was just there a couple of days ago. It's a cash cow, And so that began the whole real estate thing. Now, I did also start an accounting practice when I got out of college, but that had to give. I sold that after a few years because the DJ thing was just blowing up, and so was buying property, and those were the two things I really wanted to do. So that went on for a number of years until, as you mentioned, 1991, started flipping houses. I have flipped over 100 houses, and then in 2018, got into hard money lending, where I am lending money to the other investors that are a little earlier in their journey in our area here. It gives me great satisfaction to be a part of their equation, And then in COVID in 2020, when we're all sitting around not going anywhere, I started making notes, which became Build Real Estate Wealth, Enjoy the Journey of Rental Property Investments. And it took 4 years, but it finally came out last fall and became a bestseller already. And that brings me to being on your podcast.
Well, what a amazing background. And I love that you have that experience and having an accounting degree. So by the way, I married an accountant because
I'm sorry.
I hate spreadsheets.
Because it's an illness, really. I mean, I don't forget what you're saying, but I have kept track of every penny I've earned and spent since I was 11.
Yes, but my point is he is great at real estate investing, and he's a great member to my team because he has that background. So
Somebody has to keep track of the numbers, right?
somebody does. And you know what, though? It's made me bad at numbers. And because I'm so heavily dependent on him. So that's my weakness. I have to get better at making sure I know what's going on here. But anyway, I want to get into this interview here. And before we get into the nitty gritty, because you have so much experience, we're here to promote your book, which, by the way, is a very thick book. You held that up for me. I was like, wow, I love that. Yeah, hold it up. Show the side of that thing. Look, how many pages is that?
It's around 460 or something like
Wow.
that. 478, I think I'm looking at here.
I love a chunky book.
But I will tell you, if there's anybody in the audience who said, "Oh my gosh, Becky, look at that book," and they think I cannot. That's an old, that disc jockey would know that line, okay, from
Oh my
Sir
God,
Mix-a-Lot.
Becky.
You probably danced to that.
I know
That
it.
came out when you were in high school, I think.
Yes.
But anyway, if they say, I can't read a book that big, here's what I did. I used a lot of bold type, words, sentences, paragraphs, and so on. It's strategically.
Nice.
Completely throughout the book, so that if you as a reader did nothing but read from bold type to bold type to bold type to bold type, you will get the whole thing. And if you feel that you need to learn more
About
then
that bold
just stop
type.
and read all the words.
Yep. Very good.
And so it's actually a very easy read just by looking at the bold types.
And just briefly, what we were discussing about it, it's all inclusive. It starts with setting up entities and mindset and everything all the way through to the end. So we will get a little bit more into that. But I want to know, what is your nutshell description, and that's in quotes from you, of the rental real estate business for someone just getting started?
Oh, okay. I want to grab it right here because I want to read it word for word. Here it is. Real estate investing is just not much more than what I'm going to tell you right now. First of all, real estate's ideal, IDEAL, because we got income, we got depreciation, we got equity growth, we got appreciation, and we got leverage. All right. So having said that, the nutshell description is this: find a way to acquire property that other people will use. Let the people who use it buy it for you with their payments, which are greater than your expenses. Number 3, put up with minor irritations from people and the maintenance issues along the way while you enjoy cash flow and the equity growth. And number 4, repeat steps 1 through 3.
I love it.
It's not much more complicated than that.
It isn't. Minor. That's a key word in there, though.
Yeah.
So sometimes you have a few major, but the minor is absolutely true, 100%. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So somebody who's listening right now who wants to get into real estate investing, what is that? And we just mentioned it, that it's also in your book, but what's the mindset that someone needs before they get into investing?
Well, first of all, if you're talking specifically about real estate investing, you got to get past 2 preconceptions, and they're at opposite ends. One is the preconception that it's too easy. It's all rainbows and unicorns, and if they have a speed bump not long after they get started, then they quit.
Right.
So that's bad. You got to go into it understanding, like it said in the nutshell, is in minor irritations, and you can have some bigger ones, but those are rarely insurmountable, especially if you surround yourself with other people doing the same thing that you are in local professional organizations and so on. And the other preconception would be that it's all about bad tenants and broken toilets. It's just not.
Right.
Now, I teach what we call our Landlord 101 class for the professional organization I've been a member of for a long time, been on the board, been president for 6 years. I'm actually finishing up 8 years now as vice president because everybody's been president after me, keeps wanting me to be the VP. But anyway, I teach what we call Landlord 101 class. It's not a property acquisition class. It's okay, now you have your property. Here's how you manage your property and your tenants and so on. And we cover obviously tenant selection in there, and I cover that extensively in the book, because if you don't have tenant selection down, you're not going to have a good time in this business. You might be good at all the other things like acquiring property, financing property, fixing things at property, But if you can't select the right people to be the ones there without your supervision for an extended period of time, using your thing that is worth, tens, maybe millions of dollars, it's not going to go well for you. So, but tenant selection, begins. Let me ask you, when do you think tenant selection begins, Jen? It's a trick question.
When you are looking for the property, I
Oh,
think.
yes, you got it right.
Okay.
It's actually a little further than that. It begins when you are thinking about the possibility of maybe perhaps buying some real estate. Because every decision you make after that, like you say, the property that you choose in itself and how it's prepared, where it's located, obviously, and how you market it, those are all things that each decision you make slowly narrows the potential universe of people who are likely to end up renting your place. And then tenant screening is partway through that whole tenant selection process. That's when you actually start interfacing with
Okay.
live people that you're asking questions of, or having them fill out an application, and that gets down into the screening part. But that's really my answer to that, as far as what they need to think about before they start getting invested. But it's important for people to understand too that if you can get past those preconceptions and you are willing to get some education, that most anybody, if they are willing to not only take action but follow through on their actions, most anybody can have some success in investing in real estate.
Huge. Well, I like that you brought that up because when I am looking for properties if I'm either going to flip it, have it as a short-term rental, use a long-term rental in there, I am always going through my head, well, in this neighborhood, who wants to live here? Who are going to be my future tenants? Do I want to deal with people like that? So in certain areas or whatever, I'm not, I have a rental on one street, and then I was just getting ready. I was telling you before the show, this deal just fell through, unfortunately, but I wanted to bring up, because there are some problem properties at the end of the neighborhood that we were looking to purchase, because if we fix those up, it would help with our rental that we already have on the street. So that is very, very important. And I also coach with students who are just looking at numbers, and they're going by zip codes and just looking at big picture. They're buying from afar. And I love that you said that, because that's huge. Because that's, if you're buying in a certain area and there's great programs like Section 8 that they help monitor, and they'll do the inspections and everything. You just have to really pick and choose what you feel comfortable with instead of just going by numbers and everything, because that can turn into a hot mess. And I know that from experience. So
yeah, that's really
huge
great
that you brought that up
about the zip codes, because that's a really good example of how, okay, if you say I'm going to buy in a certain area, or the area that I bought in is in this zip code, you have now eliminated everybody in the world as a potential tenant except people that want to live in that zip code.
Yep.
So that's just an example of how all these decisions you make are part of tenant selection. And a lot of people just think that tenant selection doesn't begin until you start talking to people, but it begins way before that.
Absolutely. And very, very important point. And Joel, thank you so much for bringing that up. Now, the other side of tenants, we have management. Do you self-manage everything? Do you hire management companies? What are the best practices for choosing a management company? Talk to us, because that's been a thorn in my side for one of my properties. So I'm just curious if you have a strategy for moving forward with management companies.
Well, I actually have never hired a management company to
Wow.
rent out any of my properties, but I do routinely use contractors to do the things that need to be done at the property. But I have
Gotcha.
always wanted to maintain control of not only the numbers, because I'm the accounting guy, but also the tenant selection, So, I mean, as I went through my career growing the number of properties we have, and then eventually retiring from the DJ work in 2011, it was my desire to have the property management, in particular the tenant and business part of it just be what I do. I mean, my goal was
Gotcha.
not to like have nothing to do, you know. So that's I have never ended up hiring any property management people or that included showing the apartments and signing leases and things like
Gotcha.
that, which should, I don't know how it is in other states other than Pennsylvania, but here you cannot do that unless you are working under a licensed real estate broker. You know, nobody can hold themselves out as a property manager unless they are a realtor, basically.
Gotcha.
Now you can do property maintenance. That's a different thing, you know, but
And
for us,
that maintenance person is huge as well. So
right.
how many do you have on your team?
Well, I have a seemingly unlimited list that is always changing of people to call, which is one of the points I make in the book is that, you know, a lot of people feel this is sort of a deterrent for them getting involved because they don't know about property very much, like what to do with property. One of the points I make is that you don't have to know how to do everything. You just have to know who to call. Like there are certain things that I know how to do that when I started, my dad was still alive and he was never an investor, but he taught me a lot of things in the like carpentry and building
Nice.
maintenance sort of thing. And I don't regret that at all, learning
Mhm.
that back in the 70s and my 20s and so on, because then that taught me what can be done and how it should be done so that I can select somebody that I can tell if they're doing it right, if they're doing it in a reasonable length of time. And eventually I learned that they're doing it for a reasonable price and so on. So if I'm, you know, working my way out of doing things, it was working my way out of those sort of maintenance things, you know. But you have to early on, and I just gave this talk at the Mr. Landlord convention in June. It was my topic is how to deal with contractors. And the main thing is that you need to build a list of who you want to work with before you even need them,
Yep.
you know, and you know, get that list from a variety of sources that we covered, everything from references to seeing somebody's name. I've literally gotten some of my best contractors from seeing their phone number and their name on the side of their truck when we're beside each other in traffic,
Yep.
you know. And but also being kind of, to answer your question here, more than just one person or one contractor deep on any given trade. For example, like don't just know one plumber,
Right.
because if you have an emergency, yeah, you want to go to your go-to guy, but what if he's also taking care of somebody else's emergency?
Yep.
You need to go to your next person who hopefully doesn't have an emergency for somebody else he's taking care of and can take care of yours, you know?
Love it.
So to answer your question, I have dozens of people on my team, you know.
And that's huge because going back to, students who are buying in specific zip codes, they get like one or two names. I'm like, no, you need several bids if you're doing any
Yeah.
type of BRRRR strategy here and things like that. So I want to go back to, you got your first property in 1978. And
Mhm.
one thing I want to commend you on is you said you still have that very first property and that
I
it's
have
a
my second
cash
one and
cow.
my third one too.
I mean, there are so many people in this industry who get rentals and then sell them off in 3 or 4 or 5 years and, do this. And like, there's a huge benefit to holding them long. Rentals are a long-term game. So a
Mhm.
lot of people have to kind of flip that mindset. But I want to now fast forward to 1991 when you started flipping.
Yeah.
What made you make the change and what were some of the differences in the business? What was 1991 like for you?
Well, let me before I answer that, tell you what 1978 was like. When
Okay.
I bought my first property, Jimmy Carter was president. Crime was 22%. Inflation was out of control, and my point is that no matter having been in this business now almost 48 years, I've been through a lot of economic cycles.
Yes.
So my point is there are deals that can be found no matter where we are in any economic cycle. A good deal is a good deal. You just simply from time to time have to change your approach, you change the way you finance, change where you look for properties, but there's always something out there. There's always distressed sellers and so on. And so, I when I started out, I was reading hardcover books by guys like Bill Nickerson and Al Lowry that your audience has probably never heard of, but like Bill Nickerson was Ron LeGrand's mentor. Ron LeGrand.
Wow.
Ron LeGrand, by the way, got a hold of my book, and you know what he said? He said, "I wish I would have had." This is his written review. He said, I wish I would have had his book when I was getting started.
That's huge because
Yeah.
he's a legend right there.
Yeah.
So
So at first I thought, well, this is all about rentals, and that's what I did for a while. But as time went by, we got into the age of the late night cable TV, half-hour infomercial TV
yep.
gurus
Yep.
selling their cassette tape courses with the little manual that you followed through when you listened to the cassette tapes. Okay, so I had a whole shelf full of those, and what those guys started talking about, that's what brought me into flipping. So my first few houses I flipped, I did the classic find some money partners and do the work yourself and split the profits. I had two partners that put up the money. I did the work. We split it three ways. Did that for the second house. Third house, I had one partner and I put up the money. I put up half the money. He put up half the money and we split. And then after that, I was on my own. So it was just a matter of how the education was sort of being rolled out by these TV gurus. And then when I started, we didn't even call flipping. We called it quick turn. We didn't flip was not
Oh,
a real estate term till many years later when the TV shows started
right.
using it, in their title of their shows. And so
Yep. Quick turn. So what
yeah.
was it like in 1991?
Well, I'd be happy to make like 8 grand on a flip, you know.
I'd be happy to make that today as
Yeah,
well
I mean, we're
at this
talking
point.
much lower sales prices and so on. I recall it was a good market. I don't recall much trouble selling the houses after we had fixed them up. My dad was still alive and he helped me on my first few houses
Nice.
and I was learning a lot doing them and it was a good time. Now my strategy was that I would use the profits from flipping to acquire more rental property.
Right. Yep. And that's what a lot of people in this industry do is they flip a
Yeah.
couple to build some capital to put towards rental properties, which is
Yeah.
very, very smart. All right. So I want to kind of change direction here and let's get into financials because I got an accounting guy on my show. I want to pick your brain about this stuff. So let's talk numbers. We're going to get into taxes. Can you answer some questions about taxes?
If I can, I'll make up an answer.
Perfect. So, what are some tax implement,
Implementation.
it's still early morning for me of owning rentals.
Implications.
Implications is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. Implications of owning rentals. And are there any deductions that help people? Like what are some positives and negatives with
Yeah.
taxes and rentals?
Sure. There are several, really cool tax benefits for people who own rentals, and you got to keep in mind. I know people get a bad impression of Congress and so on, but the reason why the tax laws are as favorable as they are to people that want to invest in rental real estate is because so many people in Congress, no matter what party they're from or whether they're in Senate or the House, they own rental property.
Yep.
They have built their fortunes owning real estate. So that's why it's partial. And also, the government realizes that everybody here has to live somewhere. So let's incentivize the private industry to create housing to, give people a place to live so that the government doesn't have to do it like they have to do in certain unnamed countries, around the world.
Yeah.
So anyway, some of the big things, of course, is depreciation to begin with. Depreciation means the slow expensing of an expensive asset,
Yep.
and real estate buildings fall into that. You can't depreciate the land, but the government just doesn't want you to buy a house for $100,000 that you're going to rent out and then take a write-off for $100,000 all in the year that you bought it. They say, look, we understand that's going to be around for a while, so let's just take a little bit of it every year. Okay, that's cool. But the new tax law, the big beautiful bill, has made permanent some things that involve different ways to have accelerated depreciation. Straight line depreciation is when you take an equal amount every year, the whole time that you own the property, up to, well, for an example, residential rentals, like 27 and a half years,
Right.
and then you're done. You can't write anything more. It was the same amount every year. Accelerated depreciation would be one of the variety of methods that can be used to take more depreciation in the early years and less in the later
Oh.
years, which can come back to bite you because not only do you have a greater gain then later on for tax purposes, but also accelerated depreciation has to be recaptured, as they say. In other words, added back into your income that year at the
Right.
normal tax rate, and it can be a little messy. But anyway, depreciation as a whole, that's cool. It's a the reason why it's cool is because it is an expense against your income that has had no cash outlay. Okay, so that's it's kind of like getting a deduction for not spending money. But moving on to something else, of course, when you own property, like real estate, it falls into the category of the type of assets that you, like shares of stock, that you can have long-term capital gain tax
Mm-hmm.
instead of having something taxed at the same rate as the income from your job. If you hold the asset longer than a year, it goes to a lower percentage that the gain would be taxed on. And then you have the 1031 exchange law,
Right.
which allows you to sell a property and replace it within a certain length of time, like 45 days or so, with any other kind of real estate
Of the
that
same
you
value
then
or
transfer
more.
the
Right.
basis of your first property into your second property, so that there's no gain reported for
Right.
that transaction. The gain is ultimately reported perhaps decades later when you finally sell whatever is the last property that you own, And now if you never sell it and your heirs inherit it, bam, all of a
Yep.
sudden their cost basis is whatever the market value was at the time of your death, and there was never any gain
Right.
reported for that string of purchases. And there's also something that's not talked about a lot, that is the ability to deduct 20% of your net profit from your rental property operations, just off the top. You know, that it originally was applicable just to businesses of normal types, like retail or manufacturing, whatever. It was part of the tax laws that changed under Trump's first term, and they've renewed it. And that initially was clear that you could figure out your net income from your business and then just take 20% off of that and not pay taxes on that. And shortly after that, they did refine the rules to include rental property, which walks the line between being a business and being an investment.
Okay.
Okay. So that's probably one of the best tax advantages of operating rental property, is that unlike a business of, say, from self-employment, where you not only pay income tax, but you also pay self-employment tax of like
Yep.
15 point something percent. You may pay the income tax from your profits from rental real estate, but you will never pay any self-employment tax, because the income is considered passive income, same
Right.
as if you owned a copyright or a patent or something like that. You pay income tax on that, but you don't pay self-employment tax. Self-employment tax, for your listeners who don't know, is what you pay if you're self-employed, that is the same as what you pay when you get a paycheck, and it's your Social Security, your FICA stuff.
Yep.
In that instance, you pay 7 point something percent, 7.5% as an employee, and your employer is matching that with another 7.5%. But if you're self-employed, you get to pay both halves.
Right. Yep. Goodness, we could do a whole show on tax stuff.
Yeah.
And you said those so well, and I can tell you are a great educator in how you explain things, because the accountants that I know, some of them, it's just in their brain and they can't get it out, but you clearly have a great way of explaining things. So I want to get kind of into your education stuff that you do. So you work with investors, both the beginning and advanced levels. What does that look like? Do you just speak at events? Do you have a coaching program? What's that all about?
Well, I don't have a coaching program. I don't do seminars. I occasionally I was a speaker at the Mr. Landlord convention, but I only have my book. A lot of times people have a book, and they're actually using that as a lead-in to sell their
Right.
coaching or something like that. But
Yep.
my educational work is primarily done with the professional organization of landlords that I have been a part of since the early 80s. The group that started here in Erie is called the Apartment Association of Northwestern Pennsylvania. Began, I think, the same year that I bought my first property in 78. And we finally crossed paths about 1981. And that association with them, going to our monthly meetings, hearing our speakers that we've had, and reading our newsletters and so on, that has been key to my success in this business. And so eventually I started giving back in that organization by getting on the board in back 91 or so. And then I became president a couple of years after that for 6 years. But part of what we do it is education, in addition to providing people like forms and like lease forms and all that other stuff. But one of the guys that was a founding member of the organization, who is like fifth generation with one of the largest developers in the country, it just happens to be here, and he's still on our board as like an emeritus member. He sat down and wrote a 4-part class that we call Landlord 101, which is about operating your rental property, not acquiring it, but operating it, and dealing with tenants, and then maybe getting rid of tenants or renewing tenants. That's where we get to eventually. But so that became what we call our Landlord 101 class that I am one of the main teachers of. And we offer that 2 or 3 times a year to our members. And in addition to that, we also have what we call Landlord 201, which is a 1-day class. The first one I was talking to you about, the Landlord 101, is like 4 different 4-hour sessions, usually on either 2 double days or 4 single sessions in the evening. But the 201 we'll do just in 1 day, and we'll have about 6 speakers, and I'll be one of them. And I'll teach on flipping houses or tenant selection or best practices for your life and business to keep calamity on. I'm all about heading calamity off at the pass instead of just putting out fires after they happen because you let it happen.
Right.
So, and like I was telling you before we started recording this, last evening, I did a ugly house tour where we took about 20 basically house flippers around to visit 3 different properties in different stages of rehab, and I taught my nuts and bolts and ins and outs of house flipping class, during that. So.
Well, I can just tell Pennsylvania is very lucky to have you. And, I'm glad you applied all of this knowledge and put it into a book. And it's a really big book, which I love. So let's break this down. Your book, which is called Build Real Estate Wealth, Enjoy the Journey of Rental Property Investment. So who did you write this book for?
The short answer is that I wrote it for people that are thinking about getting into rental real estate, or maybe have already thought that it's not for them, or people that, or shall I say, and people that are already established and are looking for some new game-changing information that can kind of supercharge what they have going. But it's written for people that need to understand that real estate doesn't have to be an either-or thing. You can add rental real estate to something else that you are passionate about, that you don't want to give up. Like I had the mobile DJ business for 35 years.
Right.
I wanted to be an entertainer, and I probably would have been further ahead in real estate had I decided I don't want to have any other concerns other than this. I understand that, but I wanted to do what I did. And so people need to understand that if they want to keep a job or a career, but if they want to get extra income and they want to bolster their retirement, it's possible to do it with something like rental real estate. But it's also possible, like I know a lot of your audience is focused on, it's also possible to leave your W-2 job as soon as you can. You can build this up to the point where you give your 2 weeks notice, and this is all you do. But the additional answer to your question is that when I started writing this book in 2020, it became apparent that my son, who is my only child, he's now 19 and a half, okay, was going to be wanting to follow in what I'm doing in rental real estate, as opposed to going into, sports or some trade or something like that. This is what he wanted to do. So I wrote this book as though he might be the only one who reads it.
Wow.
I didn't write it for a nameless, faceless audience that I would never meet, who would never hold me accountable, and that I was just putting stuff in the book that I thought would sell the book. The person who holds me accountable for what's in here lives down the hall. And so nothing in here that I haven't done or that I wouldn't do if I had the opportunity. It's there's nothing in here that I wouldn't tell my own son to do. Uh, and not just stuff that I think that people wanted to hear. So the end result of that is he graduated from high school in June of 2024 and bought his first rental property about a week after he got out of high school.
Wow.
And then he went into his first year in college. He's in the business department at Penn State. We happen to have a really highly rated business department as a branch campus in Erie. So he's able to stay at home and build his real estate portfolio. He bought his second property midway through his second term in college, and he's in the business department. And if you asked him right now, he'd tell you that his major is finance. So, but there's a couple other majors in business. We'll see which one he actually chooses. So he's on his way, and that's what I would hope for your listeners, that you would, even as a teenager, have the confidence to start buying rental property. And in his case, he's not doing it full time. He's a college student and will be for a few more years.
Right.
But our plan is that he will be able to take over all of our properties when he's out of college. And I don't mean just mow the lawns. I mean, he's going to buy them from us, and I'm going to hold the financing and get a check every month from my kid.
I love that. That is so cool that you are leaving that legacy, and you wrote it for your, with your son in mind, but now so many other people get to benefit from that. And one of the topics that you do discuss in the book is the difference between riches and wealth. So what does that mean to you?
Well, it's kind of like the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is that you know the facts. Wisdom is being able to apply the facts in the correct way to do good, in your own life, in your community, and so on. Riches and wealth is like, riches is when you have the money, okay, you've got the cash, but wealth is when you are applying your riches to do good in your life and your community. And it also means that wealth doesn't really have a direct correlation on how much cash you have, because we all know people that have a lot of money and they're miserable. They don't, have a life or people around them to enjoy the money. And we also know people that if you ask them, they would tell you they're happy, they feel wealthy, and they don't have maybe as much money as you got,
Right.
but they're content with what they have. They manage what they have well. They're not creating problems for themselves. They are living life well. When I'm doing my talks, or like being asked a question privately by somebody that's having trouble with a tenant or a contractor or something like that, I'm known around here for this answer. And that is, if I had a choice of losing all my money or losing all my relationships, I would lose all my money in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. Because my relationships will help me get my money back, But if I had a bunch of money and no relationships, nobody to enjoy that with, that would just be empty, and not worthwhile. So the ultimate conclusion to what I'm saying is that don't make a withdrawal from a good relationship just to make a deposit in your bank.
Ooh. That is some major nuggetage right there.
Is that a little badassery there?
That is today, Jen? That is a very good badassery bestowment from the man, Joel Miller. That was amazing. Well, before we go to the second part of the podcast here, which is a short little part here, which is what makes you a badass, do you have if there's a listener out there who's still kind of sitting on the fence about getting into real estate investing, what advice do you have for that person?
You need to get a little education.
Yes.
Let me repeat that. You need to get a little education.
Louder for the people in the back.
You don't have to know everything before you even take your first step. A lot of people get caught up in the paralysis of analysis.
Yep.
And let me just say that once you get started, you will learn what you need to learn along the way, not only from your own activities, but also from the other people that you start associating with, particularly if you connect yourself with a local organization of people, like-minded people that are also
Right.
doing the same thing you're doing or have done.
Yep.
You sit down at a table with people that are completely different ends. Like the guy I told you that's fifth generation developer, we have our dinner meetings. You might find yourself looking for your first property sitting at the same table with him for
Awesome.
dinner, So the point is, get some education, but don't think you need to know everything to start taking steps. But just be committed that you're going to take action and then follow through on your action. Lots of people take action and you say, "Oh, I took action. That's what they said I was supposed to do." And they don't follow through. And so then it ends. You have to have commitment on top of that taking action part.
Well, those words are gold, Joel. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we are going to go into the second part of the podcast here, which is what makes Joel Miller a badass, which you clearly are. And I use the acronym BADASS. And the first letter is B for book. What's a book that's made a huge difference in your life?
Have you ever even seen this book before?
You had that ready to go. Now,
I did.
Some people are only listening, so you got to read what that is.
It's called Grow Rich with Peace of Mind. It's by Napoleon Hill, who also wrote
Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich, yeah,
yes.
Which I also read. But heck, my copyright on my copy is 1967.
Wow.
And it was his follow-up to Think and Grow Rich, and it's how to earn all the money you need and enrich every part of your life. And this is not specifically a real estate book, but this is a mindset book.
Yep.
So this is one of the earliest things that I read.
Huge. Good one. I'm going to have to check that out. I only know Think and Grow Rich, so thank you for sharing that. All right. The first A in badass is advice. You've given us amazing advice on this show, but what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Well, and I want you to say that, or I want you to understand that when I say this answer, it's not really pointing to me. I'm just going to say this because it's true. Don't take advice from anybody you wouldn't trade places with.
Ooh, that is a good one. Let that settle in. That one is good. Whew. All right. D is for drive. What drives you to be successful?
Well, the obvious answer, and I hope it's everybody's answer, is your relationships, the people you're close to, like particularly your family. I want to be successful to provide for my family, beyond paycheck to paycheck, and have some nice things. But I also want to be successful at sharing what I can to help other people be successful.
Wonderful.
I feel success when other people tell me that they've had success because of something I said or did to them.
Yes, that definitely is, people in this industry, you get your rental properties, you start getting the cash flow going, and you develop teams to start running things for you, and you have time after. I mean, you said it earlier when you retired from the DJ business that you didn't want to just sit around and do nothing. That's why you manage your own properties. You have still things going on keeping you sharp. And so that is just another avenue for people who have been in this industry for so long to give back to others, because so many gave to us in the beginning. So thank you for saying that. All right. The second A in badass is for aspiration. I'm a big goal setter. So what is a goal you are currently working on?
The biggest goal I have right now relates to my book. I am trying to sell my book, Jen.
All right. Well, you are definitely going to get some buyers from this podcast, because I'm looking at it. I love a thick book. You said a lot of people like it thinner, but I love that you talked about the bold face, where you can just go from the bold sections and then, oh, this one I want to learn more about, and then read further into the chapter. So I love all that. It's not scary. It looks amazing. So I'm sorry, I cut you off. Keep going.
And just to say that the reason why it's as large as it is because it's not just a big story or something like that. It's become the go-to resource book. The people that read this and review it are saying this is not the kind of book you buy and and read and put on your bookshelf and say, yeah, it's over there. I know it's there. I read that. This is the kind of book you read and park on your desk because you're going to refer to it. It's got over 150 different bullet point type lists of things like what the questions to ask people when they call in response to your ad, the questions to ask a reference that somebody gives, the questions to ask contractors, the bullet point list for doing due diligence on a property, all this stuff. I mean, there's even a bullet point list there of some tools that you might want to have if you're really, really just getting started. It's a lot. And so it's a reference book too.
By the way, where do they find this book to purchase it?
Well, the best, you can find it on about 15 different platforms, but Amazon is the main one. If you just go to the Amazon and put in Joel Miller Real Estate or Build Real Estate Wealth or something, you'll get right to it. But my website that's dedicated just to the book is very simple. It's joelmillerbooks.com. JOELMILLERBOOKS.com. And you can click on something on the homepage. It'll show you the entire table of contents and tell you what I'm saying is in this book. You can say, oh, I see what he's covering there. And there's another button you can click on that has some sample content from each of the chapters, like 3 or 4 paragraphs of the media stuff from each chapter. It's free. It's on the website there. But they can follow me or find me, on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. Just use Joel Miller. I have to tell you though, if you Google Joel Miller, if somebody pointed this out to me, you might get a lot of information about some video game character that has the same name. So it's best to put Joel Miller and then something like book
real
or
estate.
Real estate or So.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that because Joel Miller is a popular name. So, all right. The first S in Badass is for systems. What systems do you have in place to help you achieve success?
Okay. Let's talk about the goal of selling the book. The biggest system I have right now is being on podcasts like yours. I said, I only want to be on the best ones. So here we are, Jen.
I love it, Joel.
Being on the best podcast.
And being a good podcast guest is tough. It takes a lot of energy. I just get to sit back and, interview you, but it does take a lot of energy coming up and on the spot thinking. So Joel, you have been very impressive so far, and I could talk to you all day, but the final S in Badass is for success. What does success mean to Joel Miller Real Estate?
Well, we kind of touched on this a little bit when we talked about the difference between riches and wealth. If I had to put it in one word, I would just say relationships. It doesn't have anything to do with money, but having successful relationships or good, productive relationships, that's success to me. If I had to give a monetary answer, I would say, well, it means being able to do what I want when I want, with who I want, and buy whatever I want when I get there, that kind of thing. And I get that. I tasted some of that, and that's fine. But again, if I'm there and nobody is with me, I'm not happy. Mm-hmm.
Well, I am happy you came across my email to be on this podcast because now I consider you friend, and I am happy of our relationship as well.
Yes.
So this has been fantastic, Joel Miller Real Estate, and I am just so very impressed with you. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're very welcome, Jen. It's been a pleasure to whoop it up with you today.
Absolutely. And that is all. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode. Now go out there and share your badassery, and don't forget, make it a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. Whoop, whoop.
Thank you for listening to RAIN, the Real Estate Investor Growth Network. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. If you need more badassery, you can follow Jen Josie by visiting therealjenjosie.com or become a member of RAIN by registering on rainmastermind.com.